Actually, leave it on.
Is it better light for
here, yeah. Well, welcome everybody. I'm really glad you're here. It's great to see new faces and old friends. As Will Rogers said, there's two friends. Those I've met and those I haven't met. So I'm really grateful you're here. You know, the thing that's also great about me being here is that, hold on, ignore that. That you've come here for some reason that has something to do with your health. Whether that's your physical health, mental health, your emotional well-being, your spiritual well-being. You're here for some reason that's important to you, and I just want to thank you for trusting me with that, because that's the most important research you have. If you don't have health, you don't have wealth. And as much wealth as you have, if you don't have health, you have nothing. That's right. So I'm really glad you're here, and I'm really glad you've trusted me. And we're just going to dive right in, because we have some pretty amazing material to cover. Now, before we start, I just want you to turn to the person next to you and introduce yourself as a genius.
Genius. I'll tell you.
You too, right?
Yeah, and also encourage them to come.
Okay, you guys can come a little closer.
Good.
too.
So we're going to cover a bunch of material now. The way I like to teach is that I'm going to actually ask you at certain points. You're going to have to turn to the person next to you and teach them what I'm talking about. So I want you to stay present. So you have this amazing body. It's incredible. Here's some amazing factoids. Did you know that 60% of you is made of hydrogen and helium? Hydrogen and helium are 14 billion years old. So 60% of you is literally 14 billion years old. Yeah, totally. 40% of you was birthed in supernovas that exploded about 5 billion years ago. So that means the stuff that makes you up is old and it's ancient. Now this is trippy. I didn't write it down, but how much of your body, this is a question, a real question I want you to answer. How much of your body is actually space? How much of it is actually matter? You know? Sorry, I just stepped on your toe. What?
Well, space, we're 99-something% space.
That's right. We're 99.99% space. Ergo, we are about 0.001% actual matter. So that means we're mostly energy. You know, Albert Einstein said that the field is the sole governing agent of matter. Said another way, it's really this energy ocean that gives rise to matter. So here we are, this flux and flow of molecules and atoms, and that 99.99% of this is empty, pure, probability empty space. So hold that in your mind, because we're going to come back to that. So your body contains 100 times more cells than there are stars in this galaxy. It's hard to wrap your brain around that. You have about 100 trillion cells that all work together to make you. If your DNA, does everybody know what DNA is? It's the stuff that's in the nucleus of every cell of your body. If you were to uncoil it all, you could go to the moon and back 100,000 times. Just think about that. It's amazing. Your heart, it weighs about 0.5 pound in an average-sized adult, and every day it lifts the equivalent of 1 ton of a 5-story building. Do you have to think about this to make this happen? Hello. Do you have to think about this? Good thing you don't. It's constantly working all the time. It's working for you. Your kidneys clean 40 gallons of blood every day. Imagine just a gallon jug and put 40 of them up. And these two little things about the size of a half a pear are just working it through. Cleansing, cleaning, detoxifying, everything, and making everything new. If we took all your blood vessels and we linked them together, it would circle the earth twice. 60,000 miles of blood vessels inside. You have 600 bones in your body. 600 bones. They're 4 times stronger than steel and 4 times stronger than fortified concrete. And when they break, what do? They heal. You can put a cast on it, but all the cast does is sort of guide. You have this amazing intelligence inside your body. It's always working for you. your lungs, this is a disgusting thought, but if we took your lungs out of your chest, if we took the lungs out of your chest and we spread them out, they would spread out over a tennis court. But why do you think that is? It's because they take oxygen and put it in blood. And then your blood has oxygen, which runs your whole body. What do you breathe out? What do trees breathe in? What do trees breathe out? Isn't it amazing? We're all very connected. We're all more connected than you can know. 1 square inch of skin has 19 million cells on it. It has 625 sweat glands, 90 oil glands, 19,000 sensory cells, and get this, about 20 million microscopic animals. Turn to the person next to you and say, "Don't touch me." If you're lonely, you just remember that thought.
Hello.
Somebody you don't know starts rubbing up on you. You just think, that was about 100 million microscopic animals just touching my skin. Not to mention the guy who just touched me, making it add one to that. So I want you to turn to the person next to you and tell them 2 things that you just learned that were awesome. Go ahead. Turn to the person next to you and share 2 things you learned.
If they're all together, but the DNA thing goes back, what, 100,000 times?
Matthew Fox.
That was the one I was like, that one's one of the rabbit brain.
That's probably it. So far, I think that's the head.
I'm with you. And I did not realize that there were that many.
Okay, did you do it? Did you do it? Everybody do it? Okay, great. Good. Now, so you hear, because you have 3 tiny bones. Hey, Jill. You hear, hi, there's coloring books and stuff down there. You hear because you have 3 small bones in each ear. And what those bones do is they pick up vibration, sound vibration. And then through nerve impulses, connect that to the parts of your brain that create a perception of sound. But you have 3 little bones that are vibrating, so every vocal tone that I emit, based on my vocal cords vibrating, goes into your ear and vibrates those bones and sends millions and millions of messages to parts of your brain so that you can even hear me. It's a miracle. Imagine if you had to sit around and think about this all day. The human eye has 100 million, whoa, that was a lot of flipping there, 100 million rods and cones. 100 million rods and cones in your eyes. They're numbers, but can you grasp the astonishing complexity of you? What's even more fascinating to me is that eyes don't really see per se. What eyes do is they pick up on photons, wavelengths of light, and interpret that data. They actually don't interpret the data. The data comes in as vibration and goes back through the optic nerve to a number of different areas in your brain, but mainly in the occipital lobe, and then cross references to so many places in your brain. And actually what you see is not what you see, it's what you project out. Isn't that fascinating? It's the neuroscience of vision. So what you see is not really what's there. You see who you are. You know, the great poet Anais Nin, am I pronouncing that right? Anais Nin, Anaisnin. So, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And actually, physiologically, that's very true. And then what happens is you get enough people who are sharing in that same hallucination. And all of a sudden, we have what we call perception. But there's something even beyond that. So in your brain, this is really cool. Your brain has about 1 trillion cells. 1 trillion cells. Now, I don't know where you stand on the conversation of evolution, but I'm just going with it. I don't personally see a distinction between belief and faith and evolution. And if you do, well, just wait till the slide's done. So your brain has about 1 trillion cells, and that's equivalent to about 100 million microcomputers in your brain. 100 million microcomputers. Now this is what's fascinating to me, is that it's the fastest growing thing that we know of in nature. And so there's about 800 million years of evolution with multicellular organisms. So just think, 800. Imagine 800 here to here. Just think, 800 million years. You're looking at a graph, 800 million years. Only in the last 3 million years has the brain begun developing like it has. So what you have is a feat of nature that nobody's ever seen. It's incredible. And it controls and coordinates everything. And truly, neuroscientists say we really probably only understand about 5% of what's happening, which is really cool. Such a mystery. So your brain processes about 100,000 chemical reactions per second. So just in me saying that sentence, depending on the cadence at which I speak, it's about 1 million things happening in your brain per second. The brain produces 50 psychoactive drugs that alter mood, intelligence, how happy you feel, sadness, aggression. Do you know you have something inside of you called anandamide? It's the neuropeptide of joy. You make cannabinoids in your brain. The only reason marijuana has any effect on the human brain is because you already produce those chemicals inside of you. They're there naturally. I don't know what your lifestyle choices are, but I'm telling you, you don't need anything from the outside if you know how to work, if you know how to be at a peak state inside. If you know how to work it, you didn't see that. That just stimulated my anandamide. So it all works together. It all works together. 99.99% of you is empty space. And yet this 0.001 comes together for this amazing miracle that I'm really interested in what that 99.99% empty space is. And I'm really curious about the intelligence that drives that organizes all matter into life as we know it. One quick stat that's not on here, but you've probably heard me share this before, but quantum physicists have said that the probability of us being alive here in this form, on this planet, with everything that would make it the perfect environment, the perfect milieu for human life to exist and grow and evolve, is the same probability of a tornado going into a junkyard and assembling a 747. That's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. So without your brain, body, your nervous system, you couldn't run, you couldn't jump, you couldn't hug, you couldn't dance, you couldn't sing, you couldn't think, you couldn't feel, you couldn't come to this talk, you couldn't sit, you couldn't hug, you couldn't listen to Justin Timberlake, watch Trolls, or Frozen. My daughter loves Frozen. But you couldn't make love, you couldn't sing, you couldn't paint, you couldn't write music, you couldn't play music, you couldn't enjoy music. Everything we do, everything we think, everything we feel, everything you do is happening because of this miracle of you. Just think about that for a second. And a lot of times we don't think about that till something goes wrong. Till the migraines don't get better, till the back pain doesn't get better, till the pain doesn't go away, till your allergies don't get better, till people with perpetual sadness, loneliness, sense of purposelessness. We don't really think about the miracle that we are until we kind of lose it. But often that's the very catalyst that one needs to grow, to evolve. So body and soul, body and consciousness, from my view of life, go hand in hand, and I think they're synonymous with health, which we'll dive into. You not only have this incredible physical body that has measurable, quantitative, physiological processes, you also have an energy system inside of you. I said we're 99.99% empty space. You have a living energy system within you and around you. And you can actually measure this. High-end cameras can take pictures of people's energy. High-end measurement devices can start to measure the collective energy in a room. And so we have this living electromagnetic field around us. Some people can see those kinds of things. The more healthy that someone is, the more robust and connected their energy field is within and without. This has been around for thousands of years. In the Chinese system, we had the acupuncture meridians. In the yogic traditions, we have nadis and chakras. In other traditions, we have the various ethereal, astral, and all sorts of bodies. So we are connected, and health is the flow of these energy systems, seen and unseen, these communication systems, seen and unseen. And the gifts of your energy system is that they run your cells so you can thrive and you can grow. When your energy is balanced, you can feel your emotions with ease and respond in time. When you're out of balance, you either have a hard time feeling your emotions or you can't regulate them and you react. And there's a big difference between response and react. There's a major difference between being reactive and responsible. And a responsible adult human being can take ownership for their emotions and not tweet every thought that comes to their mind. Just saying. Next, when we have this clear energy field, our thoughts used, and we innovate. Like our thoughts become a steward of like some intelligence, and we innovate. We see new ways to make a breakthrough. We see new things to create. Life becomes joy. Life becomes adventure. But when we're disconnected, people think all the time. They think all the time. They think all the time. They think all the time. Do you know how many thoughts that the average person has in a day? The young lady out there who also knows how to groove said 60,000, and she's exactly right. According to the University of Pennsylvania, it's 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day. How many of those thoughts, percentage-wise, were negative for the average person? 1,500. Yeah, like 70 to 80% for the average person. So that means that the garbage that we walk around with, and I'll talk about more about how that influences your neurotransmitters and then affects your neuropeptides, which are the carriers of emotion, which then drive your hormones. It's all connected. You're all connected. But when the energy gets clear and we know how to let go of that stress and tension and pain and nonsense we've been carrying on to for years and years and years and years, the body has an innate capacity to heal itself. At a higher level of our intelligence, we can have real vision. You know, we can see kind of behind the veil of what appears to be. We can start to see and make meaning. Anybody here read Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning? Yeah, a story. He was a psychiatrist who was put in Auschwitz. And he observed people and wrote about people who made it through. And what he said was that the people who made it through had the capacity to develop and cultivate a powerful meaning. And that powerful meaning drove inspiring and motivating emotions that got them through. There's new science now, social science, where we study grit. You heard about this? The study of grit, not grits. Grits. He said Brits. Studies say grits make you happy. It's the study of grit, which is basically another word for the scientific way we can evaluate how well people do when you get knocked down, get bloodied, and get back up again. And our ability to do that in life largely derives from our capacity to develop powerful and inspired meaning about why things happen. Just a quick example, Steve Jobs, amazing guy. He was adopted. His story from his parents was always, you're so special. You got to come into our family. We got to be blessed with you. You're so special. This is how it happened. Another person, actually I met with a person today, her whole meaning for life about why her life was not working was that her parents had totally screwed her up. And I said, you're never going to get better or change your life if you keep going with that story. There's no energy in this story for you. I love you, but this is silly and we're wasting our time. One story was super empowering. Okay, I'm adopted. You know what? That means I got gifts. That means something special's going on. Some cool thing brought me together with this family, and now I trust this intuition that I have that I'm going to take this idea, this conception in my mind that's going to turn into this, and this, and this. Amazing, right? So the meaning we give to things is super powerful, and that is part of our energy field. You know, next, the ability to experience soul. Now, soul is an interesting word that can be interpreted in lots of different ways based on one's tradition or non-tradition. It's just a word I like to use, and if you don't like the word, just let it go by like the Matrix bullets. But soul is that capacity where we connect to something that's bigger. Have you ever had a thought about someone or a feeling about someone, and then they text or they call that day?
Yeah.
That's soul. Or you're just going along in your life and there's some synchronicity and serendipity that you just can't quite put into a logical framework. To me, that's soul. Have anybody here creative or in your work, whether you're a creative musician or an artist or you're in management or you lead people or you do important stuff, and some of your best ideas sort of come from that ether when you weren't thinking about it? To me, that's soul. That's connection to something greater. And finally, the last energy is we're able to experience that we're part of a vast tapestry that has a weaver with a capital W. When we have a hard time feeling this kind of energy, people feel really alone. They become loners in their own self. But the gift of that is we learn to feel all oneness. Alone becomes all one. Alone becomes all one. So those are the energy systems. Now, sorry, this slide is a little bit funny and it's not coming up too good. All of that was to say your body is amazing. Your body is amazing. And there is a lot of mystery to it. I don't claim to have all the answers. But what I do know is that everybody in this room, has the absolute innate inborn capacity to be happy, to be joyful, to heal, to transcend whatever challenges are in your way, and to find an incredibly powerful meaning. And then, because I tend to see each person as being a light, and each person's job as a light, your function, why you're here, is to then light up other people. Because if enough people, even in small ways, these invisible acts of power and invisible acts of grace every day, you never know how something you do or something you say or some gentle smile or opening the door could turn someone's life around. There's a lot of studies, a lot of stories about this in Carolyn Meiss's book, Invisible Acts of Power. People are about to kill themselves and this, why I didn't kill myself? Because this person opened the door for me. It's amazing. So you never know how powerful you are. That's your job. We're all sort of have that fundamental capacity for health, healing, and happiness. But undeniably, something gets in the way. Something throws a wrench in the machine. I'm simplifying this a good deal, but this is pretty darn accurate. Stress. Now, I'm going to come back to stress at the end of this talk, because stress in of itself is neutral. It's who you are that defines whether stress makes you grow or whether it breaks you down. Okay? Stress is actually very good. Just think about weightlifting. If I don't stress my muscles and I don't tear just a little bit, I don't get that growth to build new stuff. If I don't have stress, if my two children, don't have a good amount of stress and they don't get challenged and they don't get pushed in positive ways, they're going to turn out to be narcissistic tyrants. Right? Some stress, when you have the resources to grow, are awesome. That's eustress, EU. The Latin prefix that means good. It's good stress. Bad stress, distress. Now there's 4 components of distress, or stress that breaks us down. And the first is physical stress. Car accidents, mountain biking accidents, sitting all day, then sitting in your car all day, then sitting at dinner, and then sitting in front of the TV, and then falling asleep in that chair. That's the physical stressor. Broken bones, hockey injuries, wrestling injuries, people who play musical instruments for a living, people who type all day. These are all what we would consider physical stressors. Got it? Good. The next one is chemical stressors. These are the things that basically you eat, the things you drink, the pills you pop, and the air you breathe. Noxious, toxic chemicals that your body doesn't know what to do with, that didn't come from the ground and didn't grow on a tree. Simple enough? The water is sewage that dumps into lakes is so polluted with pharmaceutical drugs that a lot of times fish will have high quantities of antidepressants and estrogenic substances in them, so they'll grow 4 eyeballs or giant fish breasts, or they're all on Prozac. They're all on Viagra. They don't turn off. There's fish everywhere. So those are chemical stressors. And 95% of this is the food you eat. It's really the food you eat. It's the garbage that people put in their bodies. Next is emotional stressors. I think this speaks for itself. But this is the emotional stressors in life. This is the undigested, unfinished emotional material of a lifetime. It's the day-to-day stuff, and the day-to-day stuff adds on top of the bag of junk. Has anybody here been to Israel? Israel? Anyone? Anyone? You ever, you drive along and you see the tells, like Tel Aviv. Tel means hill. And so classically, what would happen is that a city would exist, a town would exist, and somebody would come and conquer it, and they build on top of the city. And they conquer it, and they build on top of the city, and they conquer it, and build on top of the city. It goes on and on and on and on and on and on. It's like just maybe move to the next acreage, I don't know. But they'd build these tells, and that's what we're like. We have these tells, we have these hills inside with all this undigested psychic emotional material. And by psychic, I don't mean freaky, deaky, new age psychic. I mean just the psychic information that rests in our psyche. The unfinished business of a lifetime. The various traumas, hurts, and scars that we carry, and then going along with the day-to-day emotional stressors. And the last one, which I find very interesting, is electromagnetic stressors. So, thanks. Oh, that's great. Electromagnetic stress. So the phones that you're on, the computers that we're on, are put off electromagnetic fields that our bodies aren't designed to deal with. This is all new. This is all new. And we know that electromagnetic fields have effects, deleterious effects on the oligodendrites and the glial cells in the brain, meaning they're not, we don't really know how good they are for you, and there's good evidence to suggest that. In the cell phone industry, there was a really good study put out at the National Institutes of Health, which was really suppressed. So anyway, not only do we have the computers and the phones, but then we're sort of residing and resting in an electro-smog atmosphere. Has anybody here been to Los Angeles? Los Angeles? I used to live there. And and you get this smog over the city. And you go to Santa Monica and you look at the beach and there'd be this like coffee cream smog right over the water. And what we live in now is basically electro-smog. So we're sort of infused with this. There's lots of ways to work with it. But all of these things add up. Stress is cumulative. Turn the person next to you and say, it all adds up. It really does. And the more stress we have, the more it accumulates. And the more it accumulates, the more stress we have. So this amazing brain that we have has this incredible capacity to help us survive. There's more evolved parts of our brain that help us to grow and be compassionate and to love and to develop meaning. But the more primitive parts of our brain help us survive. So any of these stressors that comes into the system sends a message to the brain and it says, danger! Danger! Fire alarm. Did anybody ever pull the fire alarm at school? I was at I was in this play and I was like dancer boy number 3. I mean the lowest of the low. The guy even told me you have no talent. So I went outside and I took this tennis ball and I aimed at the sprinkler system. Set the whole thing off. I got kicked off the play. The fire trucks came. So that's what's happening with all of these stressors. And it's like a matrix inside because let's say you see someone at work who really triggers you and you think that that's the stressor. And it very well could be. But it's also pinging off something from when you were 9 and 12 and 13 that has the similar resonance of that same stressor inside of you. And so it's not just about Joe at work, it's about your high school principal or the drama teacher who told me I had no credit. Or then Kristen who wouldn't like me because I was afraid to kiss her because I was super nervous and I kind of had conservative Christian morals and values, which is a whole other story in itself.
For another day.
And so all of a sudden, our body doesn't even know why, but it says, danger. Danger. And then we're sort of assaulted with the stress that comes from just, I mean, I don't care what your political perspective is now. It's a little crazy. It's a lot crazy. That's a stressor for people. Then they have like, this hip tension that never gets better, or their TMJ or their headaches. And then they keep eating. They keep eating wheat, and they're not sure why they feel kind of groggy all the time, but they've got this constant insult. So the brain says, oh my God, enough. We got to do something about this. So it has the 3 F's. Fight, flight, and freeze. Great job. Freeze. Freeze. So fight is pretty self-explanatory. That's an awesome picture, by the way.
Yeah.
So what do you do for a living? I jump across bolts.
I fly.
I'm a matador. Or we can fight, or we can flee. Now, for the modern person, fighting doesn't for most people, hopefully, it doesn't end up in a brawl. Most of us, it'll end up in our thoughts. You might have snarky exchanges on Twitter or Facebook or email, or you just might hold a resentment for 30 years or 5 years or 5 minutes. So we become guarded and aggressive. The flight response is often how we don't deal with reality as it is. So there's a lot of ways to flight. Addiction of all kinds. And the obvious ones are drugs or alcohol or sex or credit cards or spending, but there's a lot of subtle addictions, like addiction to being right, an addiction to social media, an addiction to, when we really understand how the dopamine pathways work in the brain, have you ever noticed people who they can't not do this thing with their phone every few minutes? I was observing these young people sitting next to me, so I'm there with my daughter, and these young guys, they look like nice guys, but one guy, they were just so twitchy, they were like tweaky, and the new hairstyle with the real short on the sides and this thing, that makes me nervous. The part of my ancestry that's Jewish is going, is this okay? Right? And so, in every minute, it was a tweet, and then it was another screen, and then it was another screen. I said, I can't even, how? And I'm just imagining to myself how their brains are working. And so we were completely overloaded and bombarded, and it totally messes up the dopamine reward pathways in the brain. When the more people do that, the less capacity they have to get turned on by a sunset or an incredible meal. Right? It's the same pathway. So that becomes our flight. That becomes our flight. And that which we can't feel, we can't heal. Because that which we can feel, we can heal, which means we have to expand our awareness. But when our brain's in a state of stress, which we'll go over in a minute, we can't always have a view of what's really going on. And the freeze is when trauma and stress is so overwhelming, people shut down inside. This is very common in trauma and abuse, very catastrophic events like 9/11, any sort of, and there's been a lot of that recently. So I think a lot of people right now are just going into a freeze response because it's all too overwhelming and everything feels crazy for a lot of people. So. This is. Let me just go back to that other picture. a lot of freaky stuff going on the screen. So basically, imagine this: your brain has 3 parts. We're not going to totally get into that tonight, but the middle part that's your stress center. We would call it. It also deals with memory. There's a thing in there called the amygdala. Everybody turn to the person next to you and say amygdala. Amygdala. It's a really important thing to learn because that is where we store a lot of our emotional memories. That is where we store a lot of emotional memory. Now, the truth is we can't totally isolate where memory is stored in the brain, nor in the body. It's a trippy thing. And if you want to learn more about it, there's a great book in my office called The Holographic Universe, and it talks about really memory is stored in a holograph within your body and even around your body. It's totally trippy stuff. But the amygdala stores all the stress, and when it gets too heated up and it doesn't know what to do with all this information, it's got to dump it somewhere. So what it does is it dumps it into the spinal cord. It dumps it into the connective tissues around the spine. And I think it's an interesting metaphor how people will say, I just put that in the back of my mind. I just put that in the back of my mind. And, rarely do people say, my front aches. I have a chronic... It's an interesting thing, though. Part of that is, as we understand pain and the neuroscience of pain, it's because people have a hard time visualizing and having a sense of where they are in space. So it's easy. 90% of back pain has nothing to do with your back. Actually, it's more like 95%. Same with headaches. And this is all research-driven. This is research-driven, evidence-based stuff. And so the brain gets overwhelmed and says, I can't handle all this. Let's dump it somewhere. So then we become this, your body remembers. Your body remembers. It never forgets. You may think you forget. Your conscious mind may not be aware, but your body remembers. And it always remembers. So this really funky thing happens with the spinal cord. The brain is basically extended through your whole body through the spinal cord. When stress comes, your body will assume certain postures, positions, tones, and tensions. Stress adds up, it dumps it in your body. That's all you got to know. I noticed that every emotion and certain traumas form people's physical holding in different ways. That every person's life story is encoded in how they sort of move and hold their being. And so the spinal cord will stretch in interesting ways. Now let me tell you something about the spinal cord. It's conducting so much information back and forth. It's astounding. And nerves are very, 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 very sensitive. And the thing they're most sensitive to is stretch. And so because of the anatomy of the spinal cord, as we start to dump all that junk in the connective tissues around the spinal cord, it causes the body to stretch and assume all sorts of weird postures, which stretch the spinal cord. Now what happens when a nerve gets stretched even a little bit is it can decrease its function about 40 to 60% and send all sorts of weird messages. Every cell in your body, with the exception of red blood cells, has 3 to 9 nerve fibers going into it. So if you're stressed and your body doesn't know what to do with it, and therefore you're overstretched and torqued through your nerve system, it's literally firing torqued and stretched weird nerve messages to every cell in your body. There are other communication mechanisms as well. We have energy bodies, we have the acupuncture system, but this is really good. And all this creepy picture shows is the spinal cord and nerve roots coming off of it. This was healthy posture, and this was unhealthy posture, and everything's just like, boink. Everything. I know you're a musician. Anybody else play guitar or a string instrument? Sing. Same with the vocal cord. If that string or that cord is too tight, it alters the vibration. The vibration is no longer in coherence. And then wherever that message goes is now getting that dissonant message. So people will often come here and say, oh, I have neck pain, or I have mid-back pain, or I have low back pain. But what I know is that these are just the dumping grounds of stress. Most of the time, 90% of the time. Every now and then, someone truly has something that needs to be looked at with an MRI or an X-ray. 1 to 5% of the time, according to the American Academy of Family Physicians. 99% of all back pain, they say, we don't know what it is. Discs, if you've had back pain and you've been told it's a disc, we know that's totally bullshit, except in 5% of the time. Pardon my French. Because discs don't produce pain. What produces pain is the brain, and the brain in stress, and the brain that can't turn off. So whatever you've been told about your joints or your hips or your discs, we now have really good evidence to suggest that these things don't need to cause pain. And even if they do, we can do things to help fix them. So when people come in with neck pain, I think, oh my God, where are all those nerves going? Those go to the thyroid, to the heart, the vagus nerve, which goes to most of the organs in your body, so it regulates your immune system. Sinuses, allergies, thyroid function, so energy, weight metabolism, fatigue, vision problems, tingling in the arms and hands. This region right here, this is like central, command central for your lungs, for another part of your heart, for your stomach, for your spleen, for your liver, for your gallbladder, for your intestines, your lower back, intestines, sexual organs. That's what I said. Very important to emphasize those. There's massive arteries too that go along and start. So your femoral artery tracks with your sciatic nerve. So tension, these aberrant tension patterns in the lower back can also torsion these major blood vessels. If you step on a hose, what happens to the water? Yeah, or if you just put your thumb on the end, what does it do? It backs up. That's blood pressure. It's backing up. So that's obviously not always from tension and torsion in the spine, but I think a lot of that has feedback loops to the brain, and then the hypothalamus, which is another part of the brain we didn't talk about. It can't properly regulate vasodilation or vasoconstriction. But anyway, Tension in the brain equals tension in the body, tension in the posture, tension in the body, and tension in the posture equals tension in the organ systems. It's also fascinating to me that each organ in your body produces what are called neuropeptides. Have you ever heard this term? It's a fascinating term. It basically says that every emotion you feel has a chemical substrate to it, as a molecular signature. And it's not all produced in your brain. In fact, most of them aren't produced in your brain. Most of them are produced in your small intestine, your heart, and your spleen predominantly. Also your liver, your lungs, your intestines. But you are literally a feeling, thinking body. And everything is communicating. And those neuropeptides are what upregulate and downregulate your hormones. That's what's fascinating. So ease and flow in this system, and ease and flow in your emotional system and your energetic system is often the best way to deal with hormonal type issues, sleep issues, anything. We've helped so many people get off Ambien and antidepressant drugs. And for the record, I do a lot of testing when I feel like I need to. We have a way, we use a lab, we can measure neurotransmitters and hormones and all that, so we can be very objective and scientific about it. I tell you the stuff that people come in here so messed up on hormone replacement, various hormone replacement therapies. We have a woman who's been coming in, her doctor gave her testosterone because her sex drive was low, because in women, low testosterone can boost your libido. And over the 6 months, she's become very, very masculine. She looks like a man. She's got acne breaking out all over her face. And I said, okay, so newsflash. I can't tell you this legally, but get off this testosterone. And then we did our testing, and she's doing amazing. She's getting so much better. She had chronic pain all over her body because she was in total inflammation, total body inflammation, which we could see. But really, the answer is so simple. I said, well, why do you think this all started? She says, you know what I think? And she's a nurse practitioner, so she's really sharp. And she said, medicine is failing me. I don't know. I can't get any answers from anybody. And all they want to do is they just keep wanting to put me on this antidepressant drug. But I know that's not right because I just know it's not a serotonin imbalance. And I was like, okay, well, why do you think it's happening? She said, because the last 7 years, and she named off all the stressors. And I was like, your system is shut down. It's overloaded. Your system can't cope anymore. So all the systems are shutting down. It was interesting when we got our lab work done. This is an aside, but all of her serotonin was perfectly normal. And what was super low was her dopamine levels. And that really regulates your ability to enjoy life and have any sort of, I mean, serotonin does to a certain degree, but just that sense of like food is good and sex is good. Sorry, you guys don't know that I say that. and like sunsets are good, and you don't need to be like tripping out on your phone all the time. So we have ways that we can naturally address that. But again, stress. Now the good thing about stress is you get a lot of energy, you feel less pain. It like takes blood flow out of your brain and out of your organs and puts it in your muscles so you can fight, flight, or freeze. You know, if your kid falls in the swimming pool and you have to run across broken glass to get to him because he can't swim, you want the stress response to kick in so you don't feel pain and can save a kid. If someone cuts you off in traffic, you want instant reaction, swerve out of the way, and then swerve out of the way of the bus, and then miss that tree. That's when you want a stress response. But having a constant low-grade stress response because you can't get off the news and the current political situation is constantly freaking you out, and then your job feels in danger, and then you have all this unfinished business from your past, no bueno, as they say in Maryland. So the bad news is over time, it totally screws up your brain. Cortisol and the associated stress hormones are battery acid to your tissues. They're battery acid to your tissues. They break you down, they age you, they screw up your genetic expression, they shorten the telomeres which sit on your DNA, and they speed up the aging process like crazy. Women in England who had disabled children, well, their telomere length was measured. Telomeres, think of your DNA as like two little snakes hugging. And on the top of those two snakes hugging is a Speedo swim cap. And the Speedo swim cap keeps the snakes hugging. That's healthy DNA. As we age faster, that swim cap starts to come off, and then the DNA uncoils. What happens in that case is we start to express a lot of the genes of disease, a lot of the genes of degeneration, of breakdown, of stress. We become addicted to the hormones of stress. And when we're in stress mind, we're always living in the past. When we are in stress mind, we're disconnected. We're not in the now. It's very difficult to have a compelling meaning for the future. So thyroid function, stress hormones, blood sugar, there's diabetes, decreased bone density, there's osteoporosis, high blood pressure, there's stroke, lowered immunity. It's a controversial topic, but cancer is an immunoregulated disease. Cancer cells metastasize in an abnormal fashion because in most cancers, it's because the immune system doesn't get in there and do what it's supposed to do. You guys follow that? So there's very clear evidence to suggest good relationships between prolonged stress and cancer. There's also the cases of like the perfect person who you think has it all together and they get cancer. I don't understand those mysteries, but I do know that prolonged stress is not good for you at all. And increased abdominal fat, which of course is the most important thing I'm going to talk about tonight. So that was a joke.
Didn't get it.
But stress makes it very difficult for you to have a body that you love. It does. It just makes it really difficult for you to feel good inside your body. I don't care what people look like. I just want them to feel good about who they are. I want them to feel good in the skin they're in. I want them to feel good with the skin they're in. Now, so what happens is, it's a silly metaphor, but I like it. When we're stressed and we're not functioning on all cylinders because we got all this unfinished business and we're all tweaked and torqued out, we're like typewriters in a world that is requiring you to be a Mac Book Pro that can run many apps and download new apps to keep up with everything and not crash. Now, I want to switch gears for a second. And I do want to say, first of all, we have a number of physicians that are or have been clients here. We have a number of physicians that refer people to me, and I have a number of medical physicians that I refer people to. Western medicine, in as much as it's great for trauma care and saving lives, is amazing for deciphering complex stuff that it's just not my business to touch. It's amazing. But for a lot of things, Western medicine is making people sick. Western medicine has largely created an epidemic of pain syndromes. When you look at the epidemiology of pain, we never had back pain like we do now. You look back in the 1950s and 60s, there's good data to support this. When people had back pain, they went to their doctor and they're told, well, you just have a little lumbago. I love that word, lumbago. It sounds like a Winnebago, but it's in your back. You just have a little lumbago and you move on with your life. And now, quickly, we scan people, meaning we MRI people. And did you know 90% of people have disc bulges. In studies with people who have no pain, 90% of them have disc bulges. 37% had disc protrusions. That's the stuff sticking out. They have no pain. And the neck, 80% of people had disc herniations in their neck. It's actually 86%. So we've labeled all these things, and then people get descriptive like, well, you've got degenerative disc disease, or you've got osteoarthritis, and all of a sudden they got this label. And we now know, because we got the evidence, that people's brains get freaked out, they get scared, it amplifies the stress response, and now the pain doesn't turn off. And they become guarded, and now they start protecting, and nobody can get better. The same thing happens with neck pain, arm pain, knee pain, hip pain, and I think the same thing happens with a lot of things. So the existing model of healthcare is not enough. Here's some icky statistics, but 90% of, feel free to open the windows. 90% of doctor visits are stress related. Do you know what the number one reason people visit doctors is for? Fatigue. Tired. I don't know why. I just don't feel good. Okay, well, we've got this new thing. It's called Lexapro. 80% of us will develop a stress-related chronic disease. 80% of people will develop a stress-related chronic disease. Now, that could be a whole bunch of different things. 2 out of 3 people are in pain. 1 out of 5 people, 1 out of 5, have significant chronic pain that really affects their life. Stress can affect you. It does affect your genetic expression. And generally, in terms of longevity, my generation's kids are expected to have a lesser life expectancy than me. Now, in England, it costs taxpayers about 20 billion quid. Just like saying that, 20 billion quid. And here, it's about 50 to 80 billion a year. That just costs you, stress costs the average taxpayer collectively about $80 billion a year. The cost when we look at how it impacts economies and businesses, I mean, it's staggering. We can change this stuff just on an economic scale. It changes the whole game. I am not such a macroeconomic person. I like the micro people, and I want to help people find the best in themselves. But it's good stats nonetheless. 6%, check this out. 6% of drug advertisements, or advertisements, depending on where you come from, are evidence-based. So your doctor who, and I've had physician friends tell me, they're like, it's crazy, Matt. I get out of school, I owe $300,000 back to the government in student loans. I got to see patients every 5 minutes, and my continuing education is the hot drug rep who comes in. They pick them. They're all beautiful, the men and the women, and they just come and they teach and they teach. They got these new drugs, and it's crazy. The whole system is wacky, and the way drugs are pushed through, it's wacky. And since 90% of most illness is stress-related, I say we start here first. So 6% of drug advertisements are science-based, meaning it's modern-day snake oil. And I think it's funny. I don't get this at all. In fact, I've never gotten this, but traditionally, the alternative medicine field has been, called quackish or unevidence-based, and some of it is. I mean, some of it's just crazy, truthfully. But a lot of the stuff we're doing, especially the stuff we're doing in here, and I'll show you tonight, is just really spot on. 80% of hospitalized kids get drugs that are not approved for pediatric use. Do you like the British spelling of that? That truly is.
Yeah.
It's the UK spelling.
I'm like, what kind of use?
There's another, if you can find it. So the cost leader in malpractice cases is adverse drug reactions. So how many of you, if you had a chance, could live to 94? Like, would you want to do that?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, good. That's great. Maybe not everybody answers. This is a healthy group. Not everybody answers that question. People think, oh my God, but I'm so stressed. I have this pain that won't go away. I have all this heaviness on my heart. I'm constantly anxious. I don't feel the joy in life anymore. So they think 94 not sounding too great. I'm going to go very briefly over who I am. I hate to talk about this at the beginning. I don't like to talk about myself all that much. But anyway, I was originally trained as a chiropractor. Before I was a chiropractor, I studied acupuncture. I have a master's degree in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And so I actually spent a lot of years as an herbalist, so studying herbs and the interaction with herbs and the pharmacology of herbs. And acupuncture introduced me to the science of energy medicine and just a whole different construct of understanding how the body works and a completely different philosophy of health. It's crazy, and it's an amazing system. And my chiropractic work was pretty cool. School was okay, but it was basically, orthopedic physical therapy one-on-one. And thank God I was introduced to what I'm going to teach about tonight, which is my work, reorganizational healing. I also have developed a method of conscious breathing and meditation and life called, not a method of life, that sounds ridiculous, but it's a way of consciously breathing and using meditation to live in a more stress-free manner, and I call that the solstice method. The solstice method. That's a reference to a biblical story where the sun stands still, the solstice. And in terms of the work I do with NSA, I'm certified at the highest level, which, doesn't really necessarily mean a lot, but it's easy to get little certificates now, or, you can pay, whatever money you want to pay to get a certificate, or, everybody's a coach and everybody's something these days, and that's fine. I think it's totally great, but with our work, you have to jump through a lot of hoops. At least you did have to jump through a lot of hoops, like a lot of hoops and a lot of hoops, and I go to seminars all over the world, and then you can only get certified at that time if the guy who developed the work, he would stand over you, and he's a complete jerk. And he doesn't like people very much. But he does. But it's highly intimidating. I also studied for a long time with a gentleman named Tony Robbins. Perhaps you've heard of him. He's about 7'4". He's actually 6'9", 6'10". And so I'm like Amanda Sterner here. I'm certified as a strategic intervention coach, which is just fancy pants talk for helping people turn their lives around. So, and I've led retreats all over the world, and I'll be a speaker at Shift Charlotte this year if you want to come. Shift Charlotte, it's like the big consciousness talk, and so there's some cool people there. So anyway, so human nervous system controls everything. We got that? Okay, I want you to, I know this is going to be tough, you're going to be like, what, you're going to make my brain work. Just turn to the person next to you and just share one nugget that you've taken away from this? Just one. Turn to the person next to you. Go.
Well, yeah, but according to the Willers tonight, right? Lots of nuggets.
Lots of nuggets.
Yeah. It's hard to choose one.
Great, you got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I understand.
Oh, wonderful.
So we're going to transition now a little bit. Big picture. Brain communicates to every cell in your body. When your nervous system works well, you work well. Your body is a communication machine. 99.99% of you is empty space. So when that energy is able to communicate freely, for the most part, you're going to have good health. Or you're going to have resilience. You're going to have grit. Now, there's some stuff we just can't control for. There's some stuff that's just in the hands of God. I don't understand that stuff, and I never will. But I know that if we can get that system working optimally, you got every chance to be the best version of you possible. Cool? So that energy system, both seen and unseen, that communication system, known and unknown, those are the drivers of health. When your brain gets overwhelmed, it dumps it into your body. The spine is the major place that gets dumped. I like this quote. This comes from Donnie Epstein. The shape, position, tension, and tone of your spine is in direct relationship to the shape, position, posture, tone of your life. I'll say that a different way. So the shape and position and tone of your being, of your emotions, of your life is going to show up as the shape, position, tone, and tension of your whole body. Isn't that good? I see Amanda going, take it, use it, I'm borrowing it, take it. Whatever you want. She was taking a picture. No, not you. So this guy, Roger Sperry, I'm just hammering this point home. It's the same point again and again. There's nothing new here. But this guy, Roger Sperry, got his Nobel Prize in 1981, and he showed, it's Nobel Prize, that means it's good research, it's good stuff. He said that the more mechanically distorted a person is, the less energy they have available for thinking, metabolism, and healing. Okay. So, this is the last nerd slide. Last nerd slide, but you're going to have to tell the person next to you 19 things that you learned from this. This is a nerve. This is a nerve. 10% of it processes pain. So just because you don't have pain doesn't mean there's something not going on, if that makes sense. The majority, 80%, 40 to 50% of one nerve is controlling organ and cells and driving your DNA expression. So it makes sense. If you're stressed and stuff's dumping in you and you're getting all torqued and tweaked and those sensitive nerves are now sending funny messages, as we say in Maryland, no bueno. And I swear to God, so I have a blind spiritual director. She's amazing. And she said, and I actually speak fluent Spanish. I almost lived in Spain. And she said, Matt, hon, no bueno. That's what we say in Maryland. And, and she said, and we also say goodbye, Jacqueline.
What? All right then.
So goodbye, Jacqueline is code for I don't like you and I don't want to talk to you.
Oh.
No bueno is that's not a good thing. So I think it's funny. Because really you would say no es bueno. Any Spanish speakers in the house? Yeah. Right? No bueno. You could say it, but it's a little weird. Okay, so no bueno, right? So anyway, nerves are mostly driving the function of your body. They have very little to do with pain. Most people just start thinking about this stuff when they're in pain. Don't worry, you have to talk to your neighbor about that. I like this picture because it's like what we're doing is we're taking the old school typewriter and we're plugging in the juiced up like iPad, MacBook, Super Duper Pro, so you can tweet, Skype, WhatsApp, all at the same time, and have all of your music and everything you've ever thought in a cloud, which is weird. But you know what? It's a really good metaphor because think that everything that's amazing and possible about you is also available in the cloud. The cloud being your body and in the energy field that you are, that everything you need is in that cloud. We just need a way to pull it down to access that information. And to have the bandwidth to download it, you can't be in stress. You've got to be in growth. So the work I do is very different than traditional chiropractic. I have no bones of contention with chiropractic, mostly. I don't really agree with a lot of the cracking and popping, so to speak. And I think the whole model is pretty much dead. You know, physiotherapists and chiropractors, they're always fighting over who's got the turf because everybody wants to be able to be reimbursed by insurance to take people's pain away. But the research for traditional chiropractic and physical therapy for pain is pretty bad, which I always find interesting. But when we look at the research on helping people transform stress, the research on turning around pain is awesome. So I just find that really interesting. So we use gentle touches along the spine, which you'll see in a minute, that send a lot of messages up to the brain so that the brain can get out of, oh my God, this is overwhelming, I've got to dump this in my spine, to let me route this through my thalamus up to the frontal cortex and reorganize everything. And remember, these nerves are controlling your, oh shoot, I wanted that to be so smooth. These nerves are controlling your organs, these are controlling your muscles and their tone, and this is controlling, you know, your posture and how you sense life. So everything starts to clear up. There's two things that happen, and I want you to watch for this when you see me demo the work. One is breathing. Now, let me pause and say, when you're stressed, what does your breathing do? It's really shallow. If you learn to master one thing for your health, according to Andrew Weil, you guys know Andrew Weil? Bald man, big beard. Looks like a overgrown hobbit. Or maybe more like Gandalf. Yeah, more Gandalfish, because I don't think hobbits have a lot of body hair. In my experience with them. Did you wax? Oh no, just how you are. So we stop breathing. And breathing is one of the most important things that you can do, because breathing is the one way you can regulate your autonomic nervous system consciously. That's cool. So learning to breathe is big. We teach that here. That's like the first thing you learn here is breathing 101. Next, you'll see what's called well, you actually won't see it a lot in one person. You'll see it a lot in another person. So in our work, there's this phenomenon that we've studied at 9 different universities and published in a number of journals, that this weird thing would happen where people would start to have these movements through their spine. And we can measure it pretty reliably and predictably, even when it's not obvious. So I picked 2 people to demo on to show 2 different things. Because when I used to do this work and people would have these explosive experiences, people would be like, hey man, I don't get that, what's wrong with me? And it doesn't really matter. The research is really clear. If we can learn to breathe, that's the most important thing. So the somatopsychic wave, sorry for the little digression, but the so the somatopsychic wave you'll see kind of moving through the spine. And what that's doing is it's powerfully releasing all of that tension that had been stored up. But it's also shifting to now being able to use that tension as fuel. And so it's very mathematically sound. What we can do is predictably measure that these waves move through in a more organized, coherent fashion, which we can cross-reference to brain activity and then heart rate variability. If anybody knows about heart rate variance as a monitor of stress and well-being, anybody know about that? We don't need to dive into it here, but it's an amazing way to really improve your heart rate variance, which is probably the most predictable way to judge how someone reacts to stress. Interesting study on a quadriplegic patient. So this guy had, fractured his 6th cervical vertebrae and had severed most of his spinal cord, had no function anywhere. And so it was actually, do you know Anthony Caliendo? So it was one of my best friends, Anthony, and Donnie were the practitioners in the study. And they would just work on the guy's sacrum and his pelvis, doing these gentle contacts. And you think, well, the guy's, he doesn't have a spinal, his spinal cord's broke. And what was happening is the message was going up. We could measure going up his spine, up his spine, up his spine, up the spinal cord, boop, and it jumped across, went up to his brain, and he starts to get motor recovery. So it's an ongoing research study of how this work improves spinal cord injury, which is cool. So I figure if it can help spinal cord injury, It's good. I'll make this remarkably simple. This was a really cool study we did. It was the largest study of wellness of its kind. It's the biggest sample group of wellness ever. We had 2,818 people. It was done at UC Irvine. Any California people in the house? Any California people in the house? UC Irvine. So we looked at people who had received network care for anywhere from like 3 months upwards of 3 years. Basically, there was a lot of data to the study, but 76% of those 2,818 people had significant improvements, both in physical pain, and that included digestive disorders, skin problems, acne, neck pain, back pain, headaches, allergies. Then we looked at people's ability to adapt to stress, and then we looked at their ability to enjoy life. Because if you're not enjoying this thing called life, that is the first sign of dis-ease. Not being happy is a major, major problem. So, 76% of the almost 3,000 people had significant improvements. Significant meaning no improvement at all, very significant, and then 5 intervals in between. So we were very significant. So that's really good. It's a really good study. And it was a big study. So Rob Blank's PhD, the late great Rob Blank, said there's no way it could be a placebo effect because it was such a big sample size. And people didn't always know what to do. Like you didn't go for 3 months and basically be like, okay, I've maxed out. We continue to see benefit even over 3 years. But this is what trips me out. So what it says is that network care had an impact on people's self-reported well-being. So that means how good you feel about yourself. It doubled it was twice as effective at improving their sense of well-being over exercise, tai chi, yoga, meditation, lifestyle choices, diet changes, and not doing bad stuff like smoking and drinking. Not that drinking is bad. I don't mean to sound like a teetotaler, but you get my drift. So twice as expected. That's fascinating to me. Now, I'm sure that other systems could show this. There's no other research that shows this. But I think it's because it so altered people's stress responses in such a profound way. But what I thought was even cooler is that then we looked at this group, and we said, okay, well, what happens if you combine it all? You stop doing stuff that's not good for you. You start exercising more. You start eating better. And you start doing network. People tripled their statistical statement of how well they felt across a bunch of domains. Isn't that cool? I don't know who wouldn't do it, but, hey. Okay, so I'm going to demo now. I'm going to demo this work. Couple of pre-frames and caveats about this work. It's different, so just have an open mind. And the cool thing is, if this isn't for you, no biggie. Just be present with an open mind and an open heart. And you'll see me working with the people. It's really gentle. If you see me, it looks like my hands are moving around. It's just me working with the person. I want you to watch how they breathe. I want you to watch how they move. And I want you to see how the person changes. And I mean this not as some woo-woo trippy thing, but I want you to notice how you feel when you watch. And I want you to notice how you notice the energy in the room change. And by energy, we have these things in our brains called mirror neurons. You heard about this? They're really cool. So when you're in touch with yourself, and it's actually in the left prefrontal orbital cortex, right above your left eye. You walk up to somebody and just be like, there's this bundle of neurons that allow us to feel what the other person's feeling. That's powerful. That's where empathy comes from. And those circuits connect right into your heart. There's literally neural networks that go right into the heart. So the heart is actually a very intelligent organ that just doesn't process conscious thought. Isn't that cool? So just notice what you notice and notice what you feel. I'm thinking that the table right here, Laura, might be weird. I can just. Yeah, but I just want to be able to have my screen.
Oh, you still have the screen.
I think so. Let me just see if there's anything relevant here.